Well, hello and welcome. Appreciate you joining in on this week's panel conversation on the topic of maintaining a sense of community in a socially distanced world. My name is Matt Fulton, and I'm the Vice President for National Engagement with an engagement company called Polco. Today we have an excellent panel who are going to be sharing the perspectives on how do you successfully accomplish engagement during this pandemic, and really looking forward to the perspectives. We host these panel conversations every week with just the intention of gathering perspectives and then sharing them with other local government officials who will benefit from those ideas and solutions and creative ideas. So thank you for joining in on the conversation. Here is how the day is going to work. We're going to take a few minutes to meet each of the panelists and have them briefly introduce themselves. And a little bit about their background. And then I'll kick off the conversation. We have 3 questions that we're going to be drawing out from communities on the topic of engagement, and really focusing in on why engagement is important in the context of maintaining a sense of community. And then when we're finished with the questions, we'll provide an opportunity for questions between each other or any other topics that might come forward. Let me introduce our panelists today, and thanks to all of you for joining in. Our first panelist is Christian Sigman. Christian has served as Brookhaven, Georgia City Manager since 2016, although he has over 25 years of experience serving local governments. He's got a strong background in budgeting and strategic initiatives. He's a graduate of the Senior Executive Program at Harvard University and is a credential manager with ICMA. Where he's also been involved with a variety of ICMA committees. Christian, thank you for being with us today, and I'd love it if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit more about yourself.
My pleasure, Matt. Thank you for the invitation. In short, I think I'm on the twilight of my career here, but I've had the great fortune to work in 6 different cities and counties across the United States in different regions, all of them east of the Mississippi. But as you know, each state is different and how they allow governance at the local level. Also, until I got to Brookhaven, which is a limited service city and only 8 years old, I worked in very large municipal counties and cities, including Fairfax County, Virginia, Washington, D.C. So, organizations with, 10,000 employees, whereas my current city is a limited service city and we have 150 full-time employees. So it was a big change for me. Because we would rely on a lot of the expertise of being a large organization, having, quite frankly, money and staff to do the types of things we're going to talk about today. But at the same time, you really get to use the strengths of your individual staff members when you're really small and everybody gets to chip in. So I'm looking forward to participating today, and I'll turn it over to one of our other distinguished panel members.
Great, Christian. Thanks for being here. Our second panelist is Deron King. Deron is the Deputy City Manager for East Point, Georgia. While his role with the city is to assist in kind of overseeing all operations for a community of 35,000 residents and 600 employees, Deron played a critical role and a lead role in designing and constructing a $17 million City Hall project, which just recently opened up. And it sounds like it's the first of maybe a multi-phase project, because I know they're working on a restoration of a historic auditorium. Some of his other areas of focus have included working with the city's equitable growth and inclusion strategic plan, which has placed a high priority on engaging the community and getting many voices into that process. And of course, just working on initiatives around how to deal with COVID-19 impacts, homelessness, coordinating with financial needs of the residents. And one that I found interesting was just bringing healthy food choices to the community. So Deron, thank you for being part of our panel and would welcome anything you want to add.
Thank you, Matt, for having me here today. And I have a great group of people to work with here with my mayor and council and my staff. And my close colleague, my city manager, Mr. Frederick Gardner, who we've been fortunate to work together here overseeing city operations for the last 6 years. And, we're in a great location in our city. We're about 5 minutes from the world's busiest airport, Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, right next door to Atlanta. And we are experiencing some growth pangs that are going on, which is great. From a personal background, I have my bachelor's of science degree from the University of Iowa. I'm an Iowa Hawkeye. And from the Midwest, from Chicago, I also received my master's degree from Clark Atlanta University in Atlanta. And, I've been fortunate to have been a city manager in several cities throughout Georgia, from South Georgia and Waycross, Georgia, up to Stone Mountain, Georgia. And then most recently, was Waycross, Georgia. I was also the manager of the city of Forsyth, Georgia as well. And prior to my tenure here at East Point. And I tell you, in every one of the municipalities I've served in, I've been very fortunate to have some great people to work with. And we've gotten some great things done. And we're really excited about what we've got going on here in the city of East Point as well. But thank you for having me here today, Matt. Thank you so much.
That's great, Deron. Thank you for being here, and go Hawkeyes, right? I'm happy to introduce our third panelist as well. Mike Land is also a recognized leader in local government. Mike is the city manager of Coppell, Texas, and has been with the city almost a decade. He's over 25 years of experience serving in a variety of different communities in Texas. Mike is also currently the Mountain Plains VP on the ICMA Board of Directors. And so thanks, Mike, for that leadership role that you're playing. Like Christian, he's a credential manager with ICMA and has served in numerous leadership roles with ICMA, as well as just in the state around issues like leadership, affordable housing, and is an advisor for the graduate MPA program at Texas State University. Mike also has a distinction of being a past president of the Texas City Manager Association. Mike, thanks a lot for being here. You want to share a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Thank you again, Matt. It's great to join Christian and everybody here on the panel. The background is I've worked in Florida and in Texas, and my family was young in Florida. And when my daughter said she wanted to be a Gator, I knew I needed to get back to Texas, quite frankly, because my wife and I are both graduates of Texas A&M University. But anyway, no, I've loved what I do. Capel is a community that's at the doorstep. My office is 10 minutes from the gate at DFW Airport. And we're a community of about 41,000. We call ourselves a bubble because, we don't have any room to grow. And we're surrounded by other communities that aren't necessarily growing as fast either. But we have a strong school district here, and so people are always clamoring to come to Coppell, Texas. We've been rated as one of the most highly educated communities in the state of Texas, so that kind of gives you an idea about the community that we serve. And we have a growing Southeastern Asian Indian population in our community. A few years ago, it was around 6%. Now it's at 25%. So our community is changing. And so with that change, we have to adjust as well. So we're excited to do what we do and to serve this community. And I'm looking forward to talking to all of y'all today.
That's great. Thanks, Mike. And thanks to all of you. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your calendars to participate in this conversation. So the topic today is maintaining a sense of community in a socially distanced world. COVID-19 has just simply disrupted all of our ways of life, not only from a resident's perspective and a business person's perspective, but also organizationally as a local government. And so in this kind of unsettled environment, the whole topic of how do you make sure that residents and your community stakeholders have a meaningful feeling or connectedness with the community becomes all that much more important, because everybody's life is so disrupted that in order for local governments to do the work that they do, there needs to be that connectedness and ability for getting that two-way understanding of where the needs, expectations, priorities are. The pandemic presents all sorts of challenges for maintaining the sense of community. And so the opportunity today is really just to hear from local government leaders who are in the trenches working on this specific topic, so that these ideas can be shared with others that are working on the same issues. One way to maybe start the conversation is to kind of look at the problem. It's not surprising to understand that 80% of US adults have actually never even been to a city council meeting. So even before COVID, the whole topic of engagement has been a difficult challenge that local governments have needed to face. A lot of the ways that local governments operate in the evenings or in the middle of the day just simply aren't really easily compatible with normal lifestyles and schedules that people have. And so now you throw on top of that a pandemic where people are all working remotely, municipalities are working remotely, people are trying to do their jobs at home while they're taking care of their kids. It just adds all sorts of challenges to being successful on connecting with the residents and stakeholders who all really want to be connected locally and feel like their voices are being heard. So the challenge is there, and I'm really interested in understanding and hearing what you have all done in addressing the topic. Here are the three questions that we're going to be posing and responding to. The first one is, how has your communications and engagement strategy evolved since the beginning of the pandemic? The second one is, how does resident engagement influence your success in maintaining a sense of community? And then finally, which tools are you currently using to measure feedback from a resident's perspective during these challenging times? So if you're all okay with it, let's just jump into the first question. And Christian, I'm going to start with you on this question. How has Brookhaven's communication and engagement strategy evolved since the start of the pandemic?
It's interesting. I'm ashamed to miss, did we have a strategy versus making it up as we go? I think our strategy and our approach evolved through the pandemic. I guess we're 9 months into it now. We closed our city hall on March 13th. We all, I think, can remember the day that we shut down our operations. But at that time, we had no idea when we would open back up. We had no idea of the impact of everybody shutting down and the psyche impact on the community and the social impact of everybody being at home, and what is the role of government as part of that entity, if you will. So our initial communication strategy was internal. How do we communicate to the staff? And then immediately, how do we communicate to our frequent flyers, our customers? The people who come get permits, people we know how to get in touch with. How would our tactical communications of the police department, because it didn't shut down, how would their communication? So I think the first initial wave of communication evolution was very tactical and short term. And that went on for maybe a month to 5 weeks. And then it kind of sank in that, well, we're not opening up back anytime soon. So, how are we going to do the business of government outside of those tactical operations, police calls and permitting? How are we going to do the people's work? And that would be our actual public meetings. And lucky for me, our community development director is very tech savvy. And as most of the local governments, the community development department provides the staff support to the planning commission and board of appeals. And they quickly transitioned to virtual meetings. Faster than the city council did. And we actually reused the efforts of the community development department to take our meetings virtual as a model for city council meetings. So we got virtual fairly quickly. So that would be about like the second phase. During that phase, I would say that's where we realized we still had to have public input processes for things that we were doing. We had planning processes underway, we had policy initiatives underway, and they'd still need to have a public input process to it. So we essentially extended timelines and created new tools. Old tools had to be dropped. We couldn't, rely on an in-person public meeting. We couldn't rely on a pop-up event in the community, in a grocery store to get feedback because we just couldn't create a safe environment for that. But I think by extending the time periods for public input on planning processes greatly helped. And then the third area I think caught us all by surprise was a recognition that communities need opportunities to interact. They need their social connections, if you will. And if your Parks and Rec operation is completely shut down and you have social distancing, how are we going to create or maintain a sense of community when people cannot interact? And I'll highlight three things that we did. There were many, many things that we did, but under an umbrella called Brookhaven Strong, we literally put magnets, city logo magnets on every post office box all in one night, and wrapped around a virtual event of singing the national anthem for the whole city live on a virtual platform. That was our first event. We painted a couple murals, and were things like saying, hey, we're here, what can we do, if you will. The police department, a bunch of really bright folks, started doing virtual birthday drive-bys, drive-by birthday parties for families, because families could not have birthday parties for their kids. So our police officers would literally show up in front of their house with a mask and wish them happy birthday, but not interact with them, something that, try to get out, because we weren't running that many calls once everything shut down, but we still had the staffing there. So we started doing essentially remote birthday parties and drive-bys for children's, and those became very, very popular because kids weren't in school, they weren't getting the interaction that they wanted. And then I think the last thing that we did was we wanted to have our own stimulus program, for lack of a better term. What could we do to stimulate the economy and stimulate social interaction? So that's where we started implementing things such as relaxing outdoor dining rules, relaxing outside signage for businesses, relaxing some collection fees and fines on certain businesses, business licenses and excise taxes. We're not forgiving them, we're just relaxing them in ways to get people interacting out and about in the community. So I'd like to say we had a strategy, but as we started in March, we didn't know how long it would go, and it evolved from an internal to an external perspective.
Yeah, thanks. That's really interesting, though, and congratulations on your creativity on. I love the magnet idea. I think that's just a great way of kind of branding the connectedness of between the community and the residents. And I'm certain that the virtual birthday parties have been a real hit. So the other thing that kind of struck me in the comments, Christian, is the evolution of how you are adapting to the issue as it goes forward. So congratulations on doing that.
And I credit the staff and my colleagues. I mean, there are 18,000 cities in America, and there's some good stuff going out there. And as long as we're talking, I don't mind borrowing, stealing, and copying other people's efforts.
Thank you. Deron, could you share how your communications and engagement strategy has evolved in East Point since the beginning of the pandemic?
Yes, Matt. Well, we first came into this situation last year in March of 2020. We actually got together and tried to develop some goals, a set of plans for how we were going to provide for continuity of communications, both internally and externally. Internally, we did some things that Christian had mentioned. We did provide for our employees who had the duties that could work remotely from home. We staggered their hours so that they could work from home and also provide some in-person office hours. The first week or so, we closed down the building or so, but then we did come up with a plan and proceed with that plan. And so in essence, once we opened back up after the first week or two, we then went in the process where our building hours remained the same. We had a great IT staff. I give kudos to them. We had our employees who would alternate in terms of providing remote activity working at home. They had laptops at home. They had city cell phones. They could forward some calls. And then some days where they would shift with their other colleagues, they would be in the office. So as to maintain life, health, and safety standards as we're proceeding through this pandemic. And we still remain in that space right now. Also, it's important to note that, as I know all of you all have done, we've become advocates of Zoom and Microsoft Teams, where we did most of our internal meetings were done were done by way of Zoom and Microsoft Teams. We have very few in-person meetings that's allowed for social distancing just for internal staff. All of our public meetings are 100% virtual. We did that going back in the month of April. So that includes committee meetings, work sessions, council meetings. We allow for citizen input by way of Facebook connectivity. And so we allow for public comments during those meetings as well. And so that's been working pretty well for us. We have had our town hall meetings that we have virtually. We have one tonight as well, for example. And so that's working very well as well. And then also we provide for enhanced online billing options. We're a full service city too, Matt, where we have electricity, water, and sewer. We provide virtually every service with the exception of gas. And so with that being said, we provided for a much more user-friendly experience for our citizens and businesses so as to allow them to, they could pay by phone, they could go, we have a drive-through, you could pay your bill drive-through if you want to come in and make that payment in person. As far as making appointments in the city hall, we ask that residents, if possible, try to make an appointment with their respective departments that they're likely to see, but we do take walk-ins if it allows for social distancing. And so that's worked out pretty well for us in the space that we're in. We also have provided for connectivity by way of social media. We have a Department of Communications, which has provided for connectivity through Twitter, through Facebook. They also provide for regular updates. We also have this app called C-Click Fix, East Point, which allows for you, Matt, where you can, if you have an ongoing issue, whether it's being for a power outage or for some code enforcement violation, you can report it to us and we forward it to that respective department to address as well. And I do want to mention one other thing that was very important that we did prior to the pandemic. One of the things we saw a need for is we want to provide for a deeper connection with our residents, a deeper connection with our businesses. And so I was empowered to go about hiring a consulting firm that specializes in engaging for citizen input. And so we partnered with a company called Partnership for Southern Equity. They joined us back in January of last year prior to the onset of the pandemic. And we've initiated a number of key tools that have helped us to engage on a deeper level with our residents as well. So, and then there's some other things we did. We have a pay assistance program, but there's a lot of things that have come about our engagement that I know we'll speak of later in this panel discussion, but that kind of gives you a basic overview of how we've pivoted in this particular environment.
That's great, Deron. Hey, Deron, could you just quickly share one of the biggest challenges that East Point ran into in terms of just the reorganization of your remote work conditions? Anything come to mind that presented a challenge and how you addressed it?
Well, the main thing that we had to do as pivoting in that is because we do have some services such as police and fire that obviously they can't work in that environment. And so what we try to do, we provide hazard pay for our police and fire, and 911, because unfortunately everyone couldn't work remotely, and that's the same problem I saw, Matt, that most other jurisdictions had as well. And so what we did do is provide for additional leave time for them to kind of make up for that, provide them all the PP&E that they can have. We can't really, even if our chief was here, he could tell you we can't apprehend and put everyone in our jail system because we just don't have the space to do that. And most of the counties don't do it no more. There's certain types of incidents of crime that you have to, certainly hardcore criminal offenses you have to, but something of a more minor, they're trying to see if they can mitigate that without having to bring somebody in. So I think that's one area I think of in public safety that's been a challenge, if anything, but we've been able to get through that by trying to find ways of deciding on which types of offenses would merit having to bring somebody in, apprehend them, bring them in, as opposed to mitigating it on the scene. And we've seen them work that out at this point.
Yeah, that's great. I really also applaud you for the work that you're doing. Is it called the Partnership for Southern Equity?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That sounds like a great way to connect with your residents. So thanks.
Yeah, it's been a great program for us, and there's some tools I'll mention as we get into the discussion that we've done as well. Pretty good programs.
Cool. Mike, how has Capel's communication and engagement strategy changed or evolved over the course of the past year?
First, let me just say that Deron made sure he said that they're the largest airport in the world, and DFW is right there. We're on your heels, buddy. I'd rather start from the standpoint of our culture. When you ask about communications and engagement strategy, we already had a culture where we were engaging with our employees directly through relationship and all the things that we would do. And so it was a matter of taking those elements that we had in place already and then converting them into a virtual environment, right? And what that looked like for us is we pressed forward, we pressed in on communications. We were already doing a message with Mike on Mondays. The DCMs were doing messages on Fridays. We were doing monthly newsletters for our organization. Then I started meeting with, through Zoom, all our employees every 2 weeks because I wanted to tell them, this is what I do know, this is what I don't know, here's what we are doing, here's what we're investigating, here's what we're not going to do. And the reason I say that is because our culture was so strong going in. We did, talking about with the employees, we do what's called an organizational needs inventory. We had done one about 3 years ago, and that just demonstrates the difference between here's where we are and here's where we, aspirationally where we want to be. So we had already been working on some of those things, and we've been doing that for years. Well, we went ahead, did something that most organizations hadn't done, is we did an ONI during the middle of the pandemic. And what we found out is that because of our efforts in communications, we moved several points on the ONI in the right direction. So you would think in most instances that there's an opportunity to go back. Well, we actually moved forward through that. So, and then my messages, it always ended with an opportunity for them to ask any questions that they have, and no questions are off limits. And there was a lot of consternation and a lot of concern and a lot of uncertainty, especially given. So I think we all face this, and so when I say this, I don't mean to be too critical, but from the Fed level to the state level to the county level, things weren't necessarily organized. And when you're at the local level, who are people going to? They're going to you at the local level. And so we talk a lot about our circle of influence. So what do I have actually, if you want to use the term, control over? For those things, I can communicate that. For the public, pushing out that information. So literally there were times early on in this process that what started off in the morning is this is the way we were supposed to do business. By that afternoon, it had already gone through 3 iterations from the feds to the state to the county. And so we just had to be really flexible. And so one of the things we did is we introduced the word grace early on in this process. We talked about grace for our employees and to our employees, and we had the elected officials talk about grace to our community. So we wanted to make sure we set the tone so that we're human, there will be mistakes made, we're doing the best that we can. So that's also, I think, an important message that, that we use throughout. So we were constantly in communications. I was, the other thing too, that we were doing is my Monday messages are messages of encouragement. So we incorporated music into our messaging so that we could, involve our students, so our employees in the process. And as it relates to communication with the public, much like the others talked about from a social media standpoint, my team was pushing out messages through Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Nextdoor, those kind of things. And what we would do is, quite frankly, we would watch to see how the public was reacting on those social media. And what we found was really interesting as we continued to push information out, we didn't necessarily even have to contribute anymore to the dialogue because the public was already championing, here's what's going on, here's what's happening in the city, here's where you get the resources and those types of things. So it really demonstrated to us the value of making sure we're putting out actual factual information and timely information so that the public could respond to it. One of the things that we did, talking about the community, we just spent the last 10 years building facilities for people to come together. And so here we have the situation where people can't come together. So what we did is we got creative in the sense of, and my staff could shoot me, we did a pop-up parade. We on our main drag through the community, we got with the car clubs and we had them go out and basically pull together. And there was probably about 80 cars. It lasted about 45 minutes. And we encouraged our residents to go to the local restaurants, come park in the parking lots along the main drag, eat their food from the local restaurants and enjoy the event. Then we did, National Night Out, Coppell's been the top 1 or 2 in the country as far as National Night Out is concerned. Obviously, we couldn't do that. So this year we did some things about, we called it, I hope I use the right name here in just a minute, diners, drive-ins, diners and driveways. I forget, it was the 3 Ds. But anyway, so we did something along those lines so that we could go out into the neighborhoods, having our police and fire drive around, say thank you, and at the same time have our neighbors still be able to get together outside in groups and do their kind of thing. So our team was always being creative. We were doing virtual parades. We were doing virtual runs. We still had Christmas lights up, and we did virtual tree lightings. So we tried to do everything we could as far as that goes. And then one of the resources we used, and I would encourage people to do this, and I know they are doing it, is, man, we really got after it through our library because our community, we're a community of 41,000. We have nearly, during the normal year, we have over 300,000 visitors to our library. And so it's highly used by our community. And so our library started pushing out programs left and right. They had the highest participation in their summer reading program because they had to grab a bag and go. And then we did kind of voices of the community. We held virtual meetings where we talked about racism, where we talked about police relations, and we have a program called Allies in Community. So how do we bridge to each other? So I would say that we had a culture that was already in place that was really strong. And then we went into it, and our strategy was basically, how do we just kind of change, not our culture, but how do we change so that we're emphasizing the same things that we were doing before, but just in a different way.
Yeah, that's really great. I applaud you on your creativity and kind of the leaning into the communication strategy. So well done. Let's move on to the second question. And Deron, I'd like to start with you. Deron, how do you think engagement influences how successful East Point is in maintaining its sense of community?
Well, I feel, Matt, that it's been vitally important for us to not only maintain, but also build upon the relationships that we have with every faction within our community. And as such, particularly during this time, even more so because, as you mentioned earlier in your discussion, when you led this off, Matt, as you know, most people don't even come to council meetings, don't even connect with their communities. And that was what gave us the impetus to go about the process of providing for a means of creating additional tools and avenues to create better opportunities for our residents. And also in this space is even vitally important of that engagement, because you have those who are experiencing job loss. You have those individuals who have what we call here food insecurity, people who are having needs for just putting food on the table. And so we become even more important than ever. And so it was just a great thing that our city went forward initially and said, look, let's try to find ways to connect and see of what we can do to be more engaged. And that to us is our most guiding principle of the whole process, all inclusiveness, all opportunities for everyone. And it's very ambitious, but we're really doing a great job in doing that. And I give you an example in point. We had an event on Monday. It was on the day of service. We called it an event for MLK, Martin Luther King Jr.'s federal holiday. And we decided we wanted to provide for a food supply and hot meals for families in need in our community. Well, the community couldn't have shown out better. All we did was pick up a phone, get on social media, contact some people, and we weren't sure how many people we were going to have, and we were just blown away. We had just over almost 200 volunteers that came out from all areas of the community, from the business community, from the private sector as well, and from our neighborhood associations. And it was just an outpouring of love. And you know what came out of that too, Matt, was that we provided additional people we connected with. We found out more information. So it becomes exponential. So what's happened during this space that we're in is that not only are we connecting people who are in serious need and are suffering, but we're also finding out what their other concerns are. Well, we had them in there in that meeting on that gathering on Monday. We said, well, what are some other problems you're addressing? What are some other things you're dealing with? We said, well, look, we got this going on over here. We want you to come to this event. And so for us, the gauge of success and the influence of engagement is that we have more and more people the next time we call. So I guarantee you, what I've seen from the last events we've had to what's coming up, we're having more people come that didn't come before, but because we're engaging them where it hurts them the most, where they're in need, and we're engaging with people who just want to help others. And for us, that's the true sense of showing that you're building a sense of community.
That's great. Those type of opportunities are just wonderful. Deron and all the rest of you, as you're responding to this question, can you just contribute towards what you've seen in the level of engagement as we've been going through the pandemic, either through your virtual meetings or in events like Deron just described? Deron, you want to just respond to that real quick?
Well, what I've seen is in our level of engagement is that we're seeing that there's other issues that we may not have given some thought to that are problems. Just connecting people with job opportunities out there. There are people out there who have to decide they're going to keep their lights on or going to pay for internet service or what have you. And those are things that it becomes more vitally important that we see that, oh, we have to connect to these people, because if we don't, no one will. And so it's made us have to, when your back is against the wall, Matt, you're going to do everything you can to keep yourself above ground. And that's made you, and it makes you think outside the box when you're suffering, you don't have any food or you don't have things that you need that are basically considered normal types of things that you would use prior to the pandemic. And so, and it's not just any one income level. We saw people from all walks, from all areas. We had managers who had lost their jobs. We had even people who are in much higher professions you would not assume, because it doesn't have a race. It doesn't have a particular class. We're seeing that it's all over. And that's the thing. And so that's where you need to really build your sense of community. And you know what? Trust is what we're finding is being built too, man. A level of trust is being grown, because I'm not going to trust you if you're just trying to come to me and get my feedback, but you're not helping me. If I'm starving, I don't care what you got to say. And so you got to be able to get to them what they really need, know that you're concerned, and then I guarantee you're going to have a partner down the road, and that builds a sense of community that we have. And so those are the kind of things I've seen.
Yeah, thanks, Deron. Thank you. Mike, how does engagement play into your success in maintaining a sense of community in Coppell?
One of the great things about serving on the ICMA board is you get to hear about what's happening in other communities. And Deron, as I'm listening to you, and I can't speak to Christian because I haven't heard him yet, but you and I are on different planes. I mean, in terms of the needs of your community versus what is needed in our community. When I say Coppell talks about being in a bubble, we're what would be considered an affluent community. And I will tell you that we have not, as a whole, have not been hit hard by COVID as far as the economic end. Have we lost some restaurants? Yes. Have businesses hurt? Yes. But I will tell you that part of the outreach of the community, we have a kind of a loose ministerial alliance that I have a conversation with on a quarterly basis. And my first question is, how's the community doing? And to a T, every one of those ministers will tell me, you know what? The folks that are in Coppell are doing fine. It's the folks that come to us from other communities outside of Coppell that we're having to help, right? And so to your specific question, Matt, I think that presents a different challenge because there's some insulation to what's happening to others. And so what they've all said too in the same conversation is, we don't have a lot of folks who are in need in this community, and we have a community of folks who want to help people, right? So that bucket's not getting filled because the community significantly here is not having that great a need. And when we come to social services, if you will, we contract. We have something called MetroCrest Services. It's 4 cities that come together, and for those, all the churches in our community all know that for those that are in need, as you described, Deron, that's who they go to. They don't come to the city. They don't look to the city of Capel for those kinds of services, because We have the resources, but we contract for them, right? Others provide that. So it's really just kind of a different environment. But as I said earlier, I have a city managers advisory group that I talk to, several times during the course of the year since this has started, and even before. We have the allies group that I mentioned talking about building bridges. And I think, it's just really a hard question in Coppell because the community gets outside. They do things, right? They don't rely on us, right? They're not relying on us to fill a gap for them. They want us to provide them accurate information, have them be informed. They're very appreciative. We've contracted, for example, to provide testing. And so the community responded really well to that, right? But I can tell you up until about Halloween, or actually homecoming, we're a one high school town, up until about homecoming, there was never a line up there. But after homecoming, there was a lot of lines, and it has been since, as this thing's been peaking. We'll be contracting on the vaccinations is the same thing. And I know people will be appreciative of that. But really for us, it's just been making sure we're just getting the information out, right? About what we're doing and how we're doing, the hours that we're open for our rec center and the tennis center and the library and those kind of things. And, the sooner we got those somewhat open, and that's a very loose term here, because, Dallas County's been in the red basically, for not allowing things to happen for a long time. So everything's by appointment basically, but things are there. But the community is really resilient, and it just hasn't been one that's been reliant on the city of Coppell. Now, when the CARES Act came out, man, we pushed out the dollars. We did not want the dollars. We wanted to get the dollars out to the community. So we got them out to the social services, and we got them out to the businesses, right? And I think we got about a little over $2 million, and we kept less than 10% of it, to cover the cost for public safety and some of the overtime and those kind of things. We pushed that money out to the businesses and everything. So we had a lot of communications with the business community. What's going on with you? What do you need from us? We loosened the sign code. We did all those same things I think all the other cities are doing, but we've continued to have business expansions in Coppell, right? And our sales tax continues to go up in Coppell. It's our bubble, right? I can't speak to others, but it's our bubble.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. It sounds like Capel is a very integrated and using a lot of community partners in just making communities work.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we contract for it, right?
Yeah.
If you will. So we're not looked to. It's just a different community than what Deron serves in. We're not looked to provide those types of services, and have the community doesn't have those kind of needs, or CISD doesn't have those kind of needs. We have a great partnership with the school district. They haven't needed us to step in, right, to help out with anything. So anyway. I'm always fascinated by the stories, and I also feel very blessed to be where I am. But I have empathy for those city managers that are having to deal with it a lot differently than I am.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Man, I want to make a quick comment. I think you took my comment a little differently, man. It's not that they're relying on us. It's not that we're in a different environment. Our city is financially doing well now. We're having growth coming to our city. I have a council with the mayor. My mayor's an attorney. We have 3 attorneys on our council. So it's not that they're relying on us or there's a different environment. It's just that there is a sense of community that's on a level that they're looking for things. They're going aggressively seeking it. And so that's not where we're at too. We're doing well. Our city is financially fine. We're financially doing well. We have people who are doing very well here. There are people who are thriving through this pandemic. It's just that there's a desire for service. And we have people who have done that based on their backgrounds, based on their jobs, and we're seeking that out. And as it relates to that, that's where we are. So I don't want you to get the wrong impression that because we're doing these things, that it means that there are people who are relying on us, quote unquote, because that's really not what's happening with our city. It's just there's a desire for a commitment for service that they're looking at. And our churches, we work with our churches. In fact, we were the Atlanta Community Food Bank. We work with that here. They're a partner within our city. One of the biggest distributions in this area. We have churches that work with us as well, and they're doing well. But that's just what it is. And I'm glad you guys are doing well. We're doing well too. in many ways. So financially, we're doing well. Our we haven't laid anybody off. We're not experiencing that, but it's just a level of service. And I know we go about different things, and that's what this panel discussion is about. And I know I'll have that going on because we have so much time. But I just think it's just different levels of engagement that we're seeking, more so than just a case of what someone's relying on us. I think that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, I think that's the value of these kind of conversations, because you get to get a sense for how communities are reacting to this pandemic.
Right. It's just a different reaction.
We're all responsible for the same maintaining a quality community and figuring out how to get there and engagement with residents. So yeah, thanks for that, Deron. Christian, how has engagement influenced Brookhaven's success in maintaining your sense of community?
You know, Brookhaven is very unique compared to the other panelists in that we're a new city. We're only 8 years old. So we don't have the quote, sense of community that a city that's been around 50, 100, 150 years. So, we all know the community is people, but as a city manager, it's not people without connections between people. So many cases, it's city management and the city's role to create the connections between the people and the institutions, depending on what the issue of the day is. So we did some things that we normally wouldn't have done, but being a new city and a community that maybe would have thought that the county was doing things we would be doing things that the county should have been doing during the pandemic. We had to let them know what the city's role was in the pandemic. Now, on top of that, you throw in state guidance that did not exist. State of Georgia was in denial for at least 90 days compared to other parts of the country. So in many cases, we did things that I never thought we would do. I'm not a big fan of robocalls, but we did a robocall. And the mayor just giving people a sense of, hey, we're going to get through this, positive message, whatever. We did letters to communities, old-fashioned hard letters, because we knew people were at home and they would open them. And then we actually did some advertising on our billboards because vendors stopped using the billboards. That's an easy expense to actually stop if you're a company. But we said, hey, we can get some good rates on billboards. Let's use the billboards. So, from a sense of community standpoint, we were defining our role in helping them cope through COVID-19 because there was this vacuum, there was this need for information. What do we do? What are we going to do? And we found ourselves getting all kinds of calls on things about schools. When will schools open? Well, we have nothing to do with the schools. They kind of know that, but we have to set what our role is and be the conduit of information from the schools, from the state, from the county health department. Because we are a limited service city and we've only been around 8-9 years, we don't have a common understanding within our 54,000 people of what we do because we're a limited service city versus what the county would do. And then even if we were around 100 years, because you don't deal with the COVID very often, people don't know what we do. There were people on my city council thought we should be doing contract tracing. We don't do as a city contract tracing. That is a public health function which is run by the county. So in many cases, our role during COVID was to be a communication supplement to the county and the state when we could get reliable information from the county and the state. But absent a vacuum, Nextdoor and social media will fill itself up with people asking questions and giving themselves answers based on their sources. So we actually found ourselves engaging in social media more than we normally would because we know there's the trolls out there, but that people want information and they were not getting it from the county and the state. So we had to define our role as a city, but at the same time, we're still building our relationship with our community.
I think you're in just such a unique situation of being able to lead a community that is so new that you're developing the culture and building those engagement connections. And that's just got to present just a lot of unique challenges, but also just great opportunities.
Yes, it's messy.
It's messy progress. That's thanks. Mike, can you talk about the tools Capel is using to measure feedback from your residents and businesses during this pandemic?
Sure. It's a short answer. that is an area that we are not doing very well at as far as when you use the term tools. What I will tell you what we're doing really well at is relationships, is having the conversations and talking to people and asking them, what do you need? How can we get better? And then taking that feedback and then bringing it back to the leadership team and the rest of the organization. But as far as the technique or the tools, other than the level of communication that we provide to the community that we serve, that is the extent. So when you provide that question, and it's like, man, I'm going to sound really bad. I don't have a tool that I'm measuring. Now we do community surveys and we get feedback from those, as far as telephone surveys or written surveys and those types of things. But during the pandemic, our main focus has just been making sure we're in direct contact with our citizens and asking them actually what do they need, and then how can we get better? And then we take that information and digest it and make improvements, tweak. I mean, this is a constant evolution. I love that word earlier that was used. It has been a constant evolution every day about how do we get better. And we're not afraid to ask, and we're not afraid to admit when we've got something wrong.
Yeah, no, I agree. And one thing I've learned through this panel conversation, and we all appreciate this, is that, engagement and communication is a multifaceted approach. You can't just rely on technology, and you can't just rely on face-to-face, especially now, but it's all about building relationships and just helping people in an evolutionary way stay connected, and so that they know what's going on and the things that are impacting with how they're living. So I appreciate
one of the things you said earlier, Matt and Deron, I think you talked about it too, about the engagement. We hardly had anybody show up to any council meetings when we were in person. Guess what? We have the same amount of people showing up to them in the Zoom meeting. I mean, it's just, again, I think each community, I'm just so appreciative of, communities that are getting it right. I don't know that it's not right for Coppell. But, if we talk about tax rate, we talk about, taxes and those kind of things during the budget. Last year, we talked about raising the rate just a hair, and we had a room full of people. This year, we talked about lowering the tax rate just a hair, and we had no comments. Yeah. So if there's anything that's going to stir somebody up, zoning cases haven't been overly controversial, those kind of things. So the council, the feedback that we get, so there's for us, that's what feedback am I getting from council? There's your direct feedback as far as how well we're doing. And the council, I think the council's been pleased, and we haven't had folks knocking on the doors or anything along those lines. And so when you ask about tools, man, that's a tough question for us to answer, but tools under that terminology, but we are getting feedback. It's just not formal. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah. Thank you, Mike. Christian, what tools are you using in Brookhaven to help measure feedback from your residents during the pandemic?
I agree with Mike. We don't have a tool. Everything's been anecdotal. And we saw the exact same thing that Mike saw. When you see the community reinforcing direction, information, and policy that you've put out there, you're successful. When next door is saying, yes, bars close at 10, or yes, you have to wear this, or when the community is accurately on their channels and platforms saying what you have said in official releases, I think that's being successful in your engagement. Prior to COVID, coming into the new city, it's weird. I'm the longest serving city manager in Brookhaven, but we've only been around 8 years. But I've been here close to 5 years. What I saw from a process perspective, we were overly relying on email. And I was getting close to 6,000 emails in my first year. From a process perspective, anecdotally, when those dropped by 60-something% because of your engagement, your customer service scripts, a focus on customer service, organizational structure, and getting back to people, that when you have processes and procedures in place, the engagement can be more focused on topic and not on operations per se. And then finally, something we're doing, and it's anecdotal once again, is it's not enough to just say that X number of people participated in a land use planning process. Whether it's virtual or not doesn't matter. What we're finding and what I tell my director now is I want you to review and compare comments, depth and breadth, and the types of people who are participating in planning process through the citizen engagement. That way we can say it was really successful, one was better than another, because in the old days it used to be, well, we had 1,000 people comment on the comp plan, but it turns out it was the same people and half of them were just a thumbs up or I agree, versus, hey, we're getting real powerful, meaningful input on a planning process through citizen engagement versus just a index card back or a postcard back saying, don't do it or yes, do it. So the quality of the input is something that we're measuring now. But once again, that's just linear and look back versus we don't have a scale to say this is good or bad, but we'll get there after continuously looking at the content and the quality of the engagement.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, especially with a new community. Relying on data or deeper level of data to help guide or at least inform some of the decisions that you're making. Sounds like you're taking your engagement to a deeper level in terms of, well, especially around your comp planning work that you're doing.
Yeah, especially land use issues.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Deron, what tools are you using in East Point for measuring resident feedback during COVID?
Well, you know, Matt, we've got a few things that we've been using, and I owe a debt of gratitude to Coppell, in fact. Because in fact, what we have done is we utilize your Coppell survey last year. And you know what had happened, Mike, is that our consulting firm, Partnership for Southern Equity, had coordinated that with our Department of Communications. And we did what's called a community equity survey. And that was done around April of last year. And it gave us a lot of good fruit and feedback on what we need to do for our citizens. And so from that spawned a number of things that we've been able to do. Also, prior to that, as I think we mentioned it briefly, we talked earlier before this week, is that we have utilized you earlier in this regard with other staff in our city. So shout out to Coppell, we love you on that. Now, we also, with that survey, we found out that we also had a couple of things to do, such as our citizens wanted to engage more with us. They wanted to be more involved. And so in relying on that, I hated that Mike had to leave, but our government does, from our standpoint, our city does rely on us to engage with them. Relying, you gotta be careful when you use that word. It sends a bad connotation sometimes when you use the word relying. These are hardworking people and they expect our government to be responsive. I think responsive is more appropriate. And so we are responding to their needs. And that's, let me tell you a couple of good things we've done. We have a listening session. We've done a listening session where we actually had people in our park spaced out. And we said, look, just tell us what some of your needs are. And we took some information we had from that and it provided good feedback, just an open dialogue. We also had what's called big idea Zoom panel discussions where we invited consultants from around the country, from Oakland, from Detroit, from other areas in various disciplines, from transportation to housing to environmental justice as well, and have utilized them for that as well. And there's a few more. I know our time is short, but those are a couple of good things we've done. And I thank you for all that you've done for us and allowing us to be able to use Coppell.
That's great. Well, thanks for the free commercial. I appreciate that. And I'm glad it worked well for you in your engagement work. Just very quickly, and I know we are running out of time, but just very quickly, I would be interested in getting each of your perspectives on where do you anticipate kind of the virtual settings going in your communities. I'm thinking your council meetings as well as just your remote working. Could you each take maybe a minute and just talk about where you think your communities are going? And Deron, go ahead and start.
Well, I feel that we're going in a direction where we're providing for a full level of participation. And no matter what city you're in, one thing we've all seen is that citizens normally don't come to council meetings. They normally don't come to those kind of gatherings. You have to be proactive in getting to engage your citizens. And when you do that, where we're heading to is a level of trust that's growing because we're connecting on that level. And I feel that that's where we're going, and we're seeing more and more people joining on board. And so in that regard, I feel that we're heading in a positive direction in providing for more a more inclusive environment where citizens can speak and talk to each other about what's going on without having to worry about coming to a meeting and doing that within the city structure.
Thank you. Christian, how about in Brookhaven?
I see three things moving forward. I do not envision that we would give up and revert back to the way it was pre-COVID. I think all of the pre-COVID opportunities for engagement, live meetings, we will get back to that. But I think all of the things that we're doing now in lieu of live meetings, we will continue to do. Two other observations I think will occur going forward. I think we're going to go back and revisit some of the older processes that people have said, hey, you don't do that anymore because it's not effective or it costs too much. Things like letters, citywide letters, and postcards, advertisements in the newspaper. I think they may have a second life going forward. And then finally, I'm really encouraged what consulting firms are doing in their ability to run engagement processes in the virtual world. So when we do a planning process, a big planning process, we hire a firm to run it. You know, the big firms that do community development consulting and transportation consulting. And those firms have become very, very good at offering new ways to get virtual and additional public input outside of the traditional norms. For example, we're doing a city center master planning effort right now. It's all virtual. We did set up a one room in City Hall where people could come and do it the old fashioned way if they wanted to, and nobody did. But the virtual platform was like a mini next door where people could use a GIS system, click on the area, write a note, and different icons for different topics, just like you would do in a real life planning session. And I think what we're going to find, once it's all done and you record all the input, we're going to get an increased number of participants and, more importantly, more input, more granular and meaningful input. Back in the day, you just put a colored dot on the map and that just said whatever it said. Now, in the virtual world, you get to put your pin on the map and leave as long a message as you want associated with that pin. So I applaud what the consulting firms have done in creating more robust tools to get public input.
That's great. That's very interesting. Yeah. Thanks, Christian. Well, to all of you, and I know that Mike had to leave for another meeting. Thanks for your comments and your perspectives. It's really worthwhile. You know, just every community brings a different personality based on their history and their culture and their operations. But just the way that all of you have evolved your engagement strategies to involve residents, appreciating the value of technology, but probably putting a lot of emphasis on those relationships and being out and demonstrating to the residents and businesses just that you're there to serve them and you're there to give them help however they need it. We have found that during the pandemic, trust in local government has actually increased. And that's probably based on just the way that you're all handling your engagement and your connection work with the community. So congratulations on that. And the tools are a variety. I think we all, one of the messages that I'm hearing from all of you is that personal communication engagement is just as important as some of the technology tools that are available. But data is important as well, especially as you're driving on how you make physical land use plans for coming out of this, in all of the COVID recovery kinds of things that communities are going to be involved with. So thanks for it. This was a great conversation. I really appreciate all of your input. Here's kind of what the next steps are. I will follow up the panel conversation with an email to you with information on all the other panelists. So if you want to ask questions of each other or follow up and make those connections, you can do that easily. We're going to be having another panel next Thursday. Next Thursday, we're going to be including the communities of Fayetteville, North Carolina, Douglasville, Georgia, and Indianola, Iowa. So I welcome you to be looking forward to their perspectives as well. We will be sharing this recorded session with all of the panelists, and The idea, again, is that we just take these perspectives and these ideas and we share them out through the network to benefit other communities that are confronting the same challenges. So certainly welcome any feedback and suggestions for making this program better and more informative and worthwhile for your time. I certainly would welcome any thoughts that you have on what we can do to make this thing more worthwhile for local governments across the country. So thank you so much for spending time today, and really nice to get connected with all of you, and I'll look forward to staying connected with you down the road.
Definitely. Thank you, Matt, for having me today. Appreciate it. And nice to meet you too, Christian. Thank you. So nice meeting you guys.
Enjoy the day.
Thanks so much, guys. See you later.
Have a great day now. Take care.